The 4 First Nations of the Seal River Watershed are offering a gift to the world.
Tonight, special protection is in the works for an area the size of Nova Scotia.
Didn't infringe on any freedom of religion.
Plus, a British Columbia court rules smudging in schools is allowed.
Some of our strains that we have in market right now are Stalo Haze, Mac Daddy, modified grapes.
And straining for success, this First Nation is taking economic development to new heights. Hello, good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. After years of advocacy by First Nations in northern Manitoba, the Seal River Watershed is set to become an official Indigenous protected and conserved area, and maybe even a national park. Amelia Fournier has more.
The 4 First Nations of the Seal River Watershed are offering a gift to the world. The gift of sustaining one of the largest intact watersheds left on the planet.
Soon, the Government of Canada will recognize the Seal River Watershed for what it's been for generations, an Indigenous protected and conserved area.
It's official that we're starting this work to protect a space that's so important to our cultures, our communities, our future, a place to be authentically ourselves.
Stephanie Tharassi of the Saisi Dene First Nation is the executive director of the Seal River Watershed Alliance. Her nation, along with the Northlands Dene Nation, Barrenlands First Nation, and Opipinapawan Cree Nation, are collaborating with Canada and Manitoba to undertake a feasibility study to assess what a protected area and potentially a national park will look like. Tharassi says this collaboration marks the government's recognition of her community's knowledge.
This data that we carry, this Indigenous ancient knowledge that we carry, is older than the universities out there and the science that's out there. And we really think that now is the time to give it that credit.
The Seal River Watershed in northern Manitoba is about the size of Nova Scotia, home to many at-risk species such as polar bears. But that's not all, says Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault.
It is also one of the richest carbon sinks in the world and would add 0.5 percentage point of protected area towards Canada's goal of 30% by 2030.
The provincial and federal governments will incorporate Western scientific data into the study, but Guilbeault says Indigenous knowledge will be at the forefront.
What we're trying to do with them, with the government of Manitoba, is what exactly would a protected area, an Indigenous protected area, look like? What would be the boundaries? How did they see? How did the Indigenous nations see this happening?
No timeline has been set for the completion of the feasibility study, but Tharassi says the Dene and Cree will continue to protect the Seal River Watershed.
And I really do think that we're starting to make change. I have hope because I know that the next generations that follow us, the generations that we are striving to save this space for, are going to be the ones that are going to make the biggest change.
Amelia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
And we want to hear what you think about the Seal River Watershed becoming an Indigenous protected and conserved area. Here's how to continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca, or you can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News, join the conversation, and see our latest stories. Winnipeg Police met with the Chief of Long Plain First Nation and the Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs today to discuss next steps with a possible landfill search for the remains of 2 women. In a statement, Winnipeg Police said Chief Danny Smythe supports efforts by AMC Grand Chief Kathy Merrick to recover the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron. The WPS says it will participate on a working committee led by Merrick on the feasibility of a recovery search. Winnipeg Police have been saying the search for their remains are not feasible. The National Family and Survivors Circle said today, quote, "It is unacceptable for the Winnipeg Police Board to place the responsibility on Indigenous communities to lobby for loved ones to be uncovered in landfills in order to give them a proper burial," end quote. And on today's episode of In Focus, we put missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people in the spotlight. We discussed what's next with the ongoing case involving Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo Woman. Here's a look at the discussion. Well, so Cambria, what would you like to see happen moving forward here with everything that's going on? What would you like to see being done?
Well, because the police have backed down now and they've basically said that they will not find these women, I guess we have no other choice but to call on the federal government and all levels of government to do something, because these women deserve a proper burial and the landfill is an resting place. And now we're protesting at Brady because they're still dumping trash on top of remains that we've known to be there since 2012. And that anchors me too. So how many other women are they dumping trash on? Like, how many other landfills are their remains sitting in? And that haunts me.
Well, everyone needs to come together, all levels of government, police services, leadership. We all need to come together to formulate some sort of a plan on how we're going to protect our Indigenous women, our girls, Two-Spirit. It's so important that everyone is on the same page when we talk about, the vulnerability and the risks that our women are having to face every single day when they leave our First Nations communities.
It's utterly heartbreaking, what's happening right now. It's like, how do you deal with this? How are the families dealing with the trauma from the, not knowing that their loved one has been disposed of in a landfill, and that basically police have cited it as impossible to recover their loved one's remains. It's an important part of their healing and their mental health to be able to have a ceremony and have a proper burial for their loved one.
It's not our fault. It's not our fault that governments have failed to act. However, we are strong and stronger together, and we can keep pushing together to create safer spaces for ourselves, for our children and our grandchildren. There's no other option.
You can find more of that on aptnnews.ca/infocus. Representatives of the federal government and Métis National Council met in Ottawa on Tuesday as part of what they call, quote, a permanent bilateral mechanism. The meetings are co-chaired by Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron and Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller. The government meets with the MNC to work on issues of mutual interest. This was the first time the permanent bilateral mechanism has met in 4 years. They also did not take questions from the media, but here's what Caron had to say prior to the meeting.
And through our gathering here today, we're entering into a new phase for the Métis Nation and the Government of Canada. We have reopened an opportunity for us to work together on a nation-to-nation basis. We have reopened an opportunity to make progress in the way the Métis Nation Accord intended us to do. The opportunity that we have today is one that will continue to lead us on a journey of advancing the Métis Nation.
All right, we have to step aside for a short break, but still ahead, a court ruling in BC has said smudging in a Port Alberni school is allowed. Welcome back. Indigenous leaders are expressing relief over the latest ruling in a Port Alberni case that's dragged through the courts for years. A mother has lost her appeal that a smudging ceremony and prayer demonstration at her child's school violated religious freedoms. CTV's Yvonne Raymond has more.
7 years after John Howard Elementary students in Port Alberni watched a First Nations elder demonstrate a smudging ceremony, a point is proven again.
It didn't infringe on any freedom of religion, and I think most importantly that our culture, our spiritual well-being is not a religion.
The BC Court of Appeal agrees. It's dismissed a case by an island mother who argued an Indigenous smudging ceremony and prayer demonstration at her children's school violated their religious freedoms.
The school introducing these practices to the student population, in my opinion, is a component of indigenization and a first step kind of attempt at reconciliation.
The school's Board of Education says it will continue to support its teachers, staff, and the Newfoundland Tribal Council in their goal of reconciliation. The local First Nation has worked for years to ingrain Newfoundland culture into the school system. So this verdict means a lot.
We were really worried if we lost this case, that possibly it would all be tossed out of the school system.
The court is ordering the mother to pay school district $70 for the money it's had to spend bringing the case through the courts. It was revealed an Alberta-based justice centre was helping Candace Servadius financially. They disagree with the ruling.
Indigeneity is a way of life. It's an identity. It's a cultural background.
The judge suggests we need even more of these teachings to help redress the historic legacy of schools being an unsafe place for Indigenous kids and to help create better outcomes for them. Yvonne Raymond, CTV News.
The Mikmaw in Newfoundland are getting their own regional chief at the Assembly of First Nations. The AFN approved this last week in Ottawa, giving each province a seat on the AFN executive. Currently, the 30,000 Mikmaw in Newfoundland share a regional chief with Nova Scotia. Mizel Joe is chief of the Miaubegeg First Nation in Conn River, Newfoundland. Dennis Ward spoke with him earlier.
Chief Joe, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the offer.
Can you give us a little bit on the importance, I guess, for the Mi'kmaq to have their own regional chief for Newfoundland?
Well, in the last number of years, we've always been represented by the regional vice chief from Nova Scotia. And we've always advocated to have our own vice chief for Newfoundland. Ever since the Qalipu First Nations has come on, even though they're a landless band, the numbers here in Mi'kmaq people in Newfoundland has been grown like leaps and bounds. We have 1,000 band members on reserve, thereabouts, and 2,200 off reserve. Plus, I think Mitchell's band, Qalipu Band First Nation, is pretty near 20,000 Mi'kmaq people and growing. So, you know, it just makes sense to have our own regional vice chief. PEI have done the same things in New Brunswick, and just makes a lot more sense in terms of, you know, dealing with the Assembly of First Nations and all the issues that we have that we need to be in front of the Assembly of First Nations for. So having someone on the ground, boots on the ground, so to speak, it makes a lot more sense that way.
The motion was passed with a majority vote, but after some debate. Can you tell us about the concerns and your reaction?
I had no concerns, and I was just pleased that there was a vote and it was done in a way that was good for us. I didn't hear anyone actually get up and say they were against the motion. They had talked about some concerns, but no one said anything that I heard anyway about the motion going forward. I think it was a good discussion. It didn't take long to do. It was the first motion of the day on the floor, and the fact that it was discussed and eventually passed, which is good for us.
Any Chief Joe, any timelines, or do you have any candidates in mind for the position?
Well, no. I think what needs to happen in the new year, and that we've already, myself and Chief Mitchell, talked about this in Ottawa. We need to come together to the four groups themselves and to put together how it is going to look, following what's already taken place in Nova Scotia and how it's done. We don't need to create another system in the way it was done. We know we need to reach out to people and look at resumes and make sure it's done right and proper. And once we've got that done, then we certainly going to need to have an office space. We're going to need funding, and that all have to come from the Assembly of First Nations.
Well, Chief Joe, congrats on gaining that extra representation when you get it, and appreciate you taking some time for us.
No problem, sir. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to seeing how it is going to work out.
All right, it's time for one final break, but first, here's Tina House with a look at her story coming up in just a few minutes.
I'm Tina House. I have a story for you about a First Nations community in BC taking advantage of a growing industry. That's coming up later in the show.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. From the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, this photo of an amazing sunset comes to us from our viewer, Patrick Primo. It's a great photo there, Patrick, and we appreciate you sharing this with all of our viewers. If you have a great photo you would like to share, you can send them to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured on APTN National News. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We start on the East Coast, 4 degrees in St. John's and 3 in Charlottetown. 0 degrees in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 0 in Cartwright. 5 degrees in Quebec City and -7 in Val d'Or. 1 degree in Toronto and 0 in snow in North Bay. -1 in snow in Timmins and +1 in snow in Sioux Lookout. -6 in Churchill and -11 in snow in Thompson. Snowing and -1 in Barons River, and snow and 0 in Winnipeg. -10 in Swift Current, and -12 in Saskatoon. -13 in snow in La Ronge, and -19 in Stony Rapids. Making our way west to -15 in snow in Fort Chipewyan, and -3 in Grand Prairie. -3 in Edmonton, and -2 in Calgary. 6 degrees in Victoria, and 0 in Bella Coola. 5 degrees in Sandspit and 0 in Dease Lake. -16 and snowing in Beaver Creek and -29 in Old Crow. -18 in Norman Wells and -17 in Fort Simpson. -20 in Inuvik and snow and -24 in Colville Lake. -22 in Cambridge Bay and -14 in Chesterfield. Clear and -17 in Igloolik and -9 in Iqaluit. A weather watch is in place for a big chunk of central and eastern Canada. Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan are bracing for a winter storm heading their way. Environment Canada has issued special weather statements for all 4 provinces. Parts of southeastern Saskatchewan and southern Manitoba could see upwards of 20 to 30 centimeters of snow by the weekend. In Ontario and Quebec, there's the possibility of freezing rain as well as significant snowfall. The mayor of Toronto says city crews are prepared to handle whatever Mother Nature may bring.
We have 1,100 pieces of equipment at the ready to deal with the storm, number one. Number two, people will see today some of that equipment being repositioned in different places around the city, so it is literally ready to go to work on the streets and sidewalks, where the snow is where the snow is, and all across the city. And finally, that the brining operations, they start now in advance of anticipated snowstorms, will begin today.
A First Nation in BC is cashing in on a very lucrative crop and providing economic opportunities to their members like never before. APTN's Tina House has this story.
Going back to 2700 BC is when the first recorded usage of cannabis was referenced as Chinese medicine. It was in the mid-20th century, sweeping legislation was brought in to control cannabis, and in the 21st century, it became illegal. But on October the 17th, 2018, cannabis became legal in Canada. And here in the Shway village, just outside of Chilliwack, BC, they are taking full advantage of this opportunity to grow, harvest, and sell top-grade BC bud. Chief Robert Gladstone says he left his community for about 20 years and then returned to become chief with a vision for the future.
I looked at my village and I said, it's time. I've read a lot of books by people in the world who said there is value in our land, but we couldn't unlock it. Here we were, wealthy people in terms of land, and I lived in a house as a child with no electricity in this day and age, and no plumbing. I had a burning desire within my soul to unlock the value in the land. I had a burning fire within my soul who wanted to create jobs. I wanted to do something that would change the status of our people.
And Chief Gladstone has done just that. By partnering with All Nations Cannabis and successfully getting a federal legal license to grow and sell, the economic impact from this new revenue stream is changing lives. Everything from pre-rolled, individually packaged joints to bigger quantities, to gummies, vape cartridges of oil, to bud. All Nations Cannabis not only provides products for government retail stores, but they have just opened this retail outlet with plans to expand soon. Stacey Duffy is the director of retail. She says that under the new legislation, they are hoping other First Nations also consider cannabis as a new way forward.
This is going to offer economic development and growth within nations all across BC underneath the Section 118, and hopefully nationally in working with the jurisdictional province as well in terms of each province and what they kind of operate in the cannabis sector currently.
And economic development is booming. A brand new cultural centre was just built in the village, as well as elders housing, and single and family housing have gone up, along with other cash bonuses for the members. For the last 2 years, All Nations Cannabis has also created hundreds of jobs. Bryson Rabang is from the community and well on his way to becoming a master grower at the facility.
It's amazing because a lot of people have jobs now and they get to provide their families, and there used to be so very little jobs here, and like the landscaping crew was so small, and that was like maybe the only job they had around here. Now that we have this facility and it's only growing, we could supply jobs with anybody that want to work here in the community, and that means a lot to me.
And business is good. A flowering room like this will produce roughly 100 to 120 kilos every month, and with plans in the works to expand soon, they will be producing double that amount.
Some of our strains that we have in market right now are Stalo Haze, Mac Daddy, modified grapes, peanut butter breath, and then we have about another 6 other strains that are coming into market. And we really work to try and develop our strain names. We're working to develop our strain names to be representative of what's important to us as Indigenous people. So we're constantly doing, brainstorming and development of strain names that are, representative of stuff that's meaningful to us and hopefully other Indigenous people throughout BC and Canada. So the product from here goes, all across the country, and we're also exporting now into countries around the world.
Tina House, APTN National News, Shway Village.
Certainly a great story there. Thanks so much, Tina. That's all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. If you missed any of our show or our stories and want to catch up, you can do so at aptnnews.ca. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my auntie, Auntie Bev. She made the shirt that I'm wearing. It's kind of tough to see with all the cords and stuff attached, but I did want to give a shout out to Auntie Bev. So thank you so much, Auntie, and I'll see you at Christmas next week. I'm Daryl Stranger. For all of us here, thank you guys for joining us. Miigwech, and stay safe out there, everyone.